I want to bring in Joe Moreno, who's with me, a former federal prosecutor and been our guest before. How wonderful to have some time with you again this morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Heather. Good to be with you.
You just happened to be hooked up as we were getting ready to go, and you heard there Letitia James, her short statement. What do you think in terms of how she's framing today?
I don't particularly love statements like that. When I was a federal prosecutor, I would never make a public statement. I think you should let your case speak for itself. I think it kind of, brings it down a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's a strong case. I mean, Donald Trump has a few defenses that I anticipate he will raise on the stand today. One being that he never intended fraud or to cheat anyone. Another, that there's no victims here, that all the banks were paid back, all the loans that they were given to the Trump organization. But the reality is, those are not great legal defenses at this point. The law that he's faced with doesn't require those things. So all it requires is a pattern of providing misleading financial information. And to that point, the judge weeks ago already declared that was the case. And so Donald Trump and his sons have already been found liable on one of the 7 causes of action. At this point, they're now trying the other 6. But the reality is he's already lost. And so it's just a matter of now how badly has he lost?
Okay, so we'll talk about that. Not to what we expect you are expecting to hear from him by way of his own defense. Can I just get your read, though, on the sense of the moment, the drama inside this courtroom when Donald J. Trump does sit in the witness stand?
Well, it's not the first time a former president has ever testified at a civil trial. It's certainly the first time in decades, and certainly the first time where someone has so much at stake. Keep in mind, in a civil trial, Donald Trump does not have to testify. He doesn't even have to be there. The fact that he's doing both, I think, is a testament to how important this is. This really goes to the heart of the Trump family financial situation. And this is a real estate business that's been around for 50 years. It was started by Donald Trump's father. And it's really an iconic brand in New York City. And so the fact that this could decimate that business, not only with a $250 million fine, but basically put it out of business and force it to spin off its properties, that's really, really serious. And so I know that a lot of eyes are on the criminal cases that Donald Trump is facing, but this civil trial really, really can strike at the heart of the entire family.
So a lot at stake, very consequential for Donald Trump in this case. I'm wondering, you mentioned how he's expected to defend himself. There's a gentleman by the name of, I'm going to lose it, Kevin Wallace. He's a veteran in the AG's office. It's he who's expected to lead the questioning against Donald Trump. Tap into your federal prosecutorial experience here. What are the things that you expect that he will go after, just in terms of substantively? What do you think he'll be asking about?
So a lot of this goes to, the core of it is the valuation of the Trump organization's assets, and its largest assets are real estate holdings. And so, for example, Donald Trump purportedly valued his own triplex penthouse apartment in New York City at one point at $350 million, right, which is a very large amount of money, even for a Manhattan piece of property. The judge has already found, and we'll hear from the Attorney General's office, that it was more properly valued at between $100 and $200 million, so not as much as $350. I think the back and forth is going to be, this is a very subjective, right? You don't really know what something is worth until you sell it. So I expect there's going to be a lot of that. And the AG's office might say, look, there might be some subjectivity in here, but you've gone so far beyond what could even conceivably this property could be worth that it constituted effectively fraud. So I think that's going to be the back and forth here.
So when we hear from Letitia James talking about the numbers, those are the kinds of numbers. Michael Cohen, who's Donald Trump's former fixer and former lawyer, he has said he's going to be in court today to watch these proceedings. But he's already testified that it wasn't the accountants coming up those numbers. It was Donald Trump himself who specifically directed executives to inflate his net worth. So do you think that's going to be a line of questioning?
Well, it will. I mean, certainly it'll be who directed it and when. I mean, it doesn't really matter because it all comes out of the Trump organization. So whether it was Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Don Jr., the accountants. The fact is, they're all kind of collectively being under the magnifying glass here. And so it doesn't matter so much who did it, just that, in fact, the organization did it, and that when it provided financial statements to banks and insurance companies, these assets were so wildly overvalued. And so that's going to be, again, that's going to be the crux of it. I think you'll hear the organization say, this is all subjective, there's flexibility here, and you'll hear the AG's office saying, wait a minute, again, some flexibility is one thing, but you've gone so far and beyond, it effectively constitutes fraud.
Donald Trump's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, testified last week, and Eric said that his father was, quote, fired up to be here. What do you expect from Donald Trump in terms of tone and degree of cooperation as a witness?
Well, I think he'll be extremely combative. I think the judge here, Judge Engoron, made a bit of a mistake in that he has been so hostile to Donald Trump in finding against him before the trial even began, that he didn't really give him any incentive to behave. So at this point, I think Trump realizes this is a lost cause, and he's going to fight this in the political realm. This is basically theater for him at this point. He realizes that the ship is sinking. He realizes that there's not much he can do before this judge. There's no jury. Remember, this is a bench trial. And I think he figures his legal avenue now is on appeal. So as far as this is just going to be fireworks. It's unfortunate we can't see it. There's no cameras in the courtrooms in New York. But I bet every chance he gets, he will be running out to the media to talk about what he's saying in court.
It's interesting, as we're speaking, we have our camera, we have our live shot up. We expect him to see on his way down the hall, into that courtroom. And he has stopped and spoken to reporters, sort of shouted out comments to them at key moments and pauses in proceedings previous. So perhaps we'll get that again as he heads in. You said something, many things that are really interesting, but you mentioned the political theater. So should we interpret this then, Joe Moreno, as witness stand, as campaign platform?
Oh, I think so. It seems like over the last year, the more legal jeopardy that Donald Trump is facing, the more popular he's getting. And this is where I do think that the government at multiple levels, whether it's federal, New York State, Fulton County, Georgia, New York City, I do think they have to be careful about piling on, because there are some strong cases against Donald Trump, in my opinion. There are also some weaker ones. And I think the idea that they're all coming after him is kind of rallying his base. And it makes it difficult to sift through the serious conduct and the serious charges he's facing, and those that are a little shaky, to kind of put it lightly. And so it's a shame that he seems to be getting more popular as his legal impediments increase. But that definitely seems like what's happening. He is far and away the front runner for the Republican nomination right now. And if you believe the polls, he's even running ahead of Joe Biden in some of the polls that came out last week. So it's a pretty remarkable situation. I mean, not that long ago, any of these things would basically invalidate a candidate. You'd see a candidate drop out if they faced any kind of legal allegations. The fact that Trump is facing this ocean of trouble is really remarkable if he's the front runner.
And you're quite right. We were reporting on that today, leading Joe Biden in 5 key battleground states in the most recent polls for the first time. Joseph Moreno, thank you again for coming back on the program, sharing that expertise. I always appreciate our conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. My pleasure.